All right, I've got the green light that I am live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Health and Happiness at Work. This is a podcast. Health and Happiness at Work is also the name of my book that I am writing and the name of this channel. So, my name is Katie Tombaugh. Thank you so much for being here, for tuning in, to listening. This is the third season of a podcast that I historically did in studio. And this year, end of last year, beginning of this year, I decided to go live, see what happens, put myself out there. When I was recording in studio, there is very little editing, and I was proud of that. And I love speaking. I would love to speak all day, every day, if that were the case. And I do. I speak a lot in my business on a variety of topics and supporting health, fitness, safety, and well-being directly within the workday. So health and happiness at work is actually a double entendre. I chose it because literally we are supporting health and happiness at work, meaning the workplace or the workday, but also at work in life, right? We are applying health and well-being strategies and practices immediately within the day for the benefit of how it impacts our personal lives and our professional lives. So with that, I will get us kicked off. I do have some show notes in front of me just to keep my thoughts somewhat in order. When and if we have guests joining in live and you're listening in, feel free to pop into the chat. That is not something I had available to me in the last two seasons, so I need to get used to that, but would love to know what's on your mind and to have a conversation ultimately. With that, I offered this up last month and I'll just say it again. I'm presently working with themes. So each month in my business, in my writing, in my blog, and my content, I'm unpacking or exploring a different theme. That said, we're not limited to that. We could, me and you, decide, let's meet up every Wednesday. So I'm kind of working through whether or not this becomes a weekly recurrence or does it stay a monthly. I do have this strong feeling or this strong sense that anything done consistently is a win. And so for that reason, I think it would make great sense to take the guesswork out and just say, hey, meet me every Wednesday for the podcast, meet me every Friday for the fitness workout. But I'm still working through that and I would love your feedback. And hi, Gina. So I'm pleased to welcome Gina to the podcast today. She's in the chat. Says, hi, Katie. So good to see you live with this. That means a lot. That's coming from my podcast producer from the last two seasons. So thank you, Gina, for encouraging me to do this, to put myself out here in this way and to trust the process, as they say, and to see what happens. I know it could take time to get some traction on this platform, but I'm excited about it. So let's go ahead and dig in. I am calling this episode Moving Toward Mastery. So mastery is a value that I have adopted in my business. I'll explain why later on in the show. But to get everyone on the same page, I always like to define terms, get us on the same page. And so mastery, if you're not familiar with that term, refers to having comprehensive knowledge or skill in a subject. There are some synonyms, and I might challenge that these are all equally the same. I don't know that they are, but if you research synonyms, you'll find words like proficiency, ability, capability, knowledge, understanding, comprehension, and familiarity. Familiarity to me is like the least inspiring one, but essentially I've been using the word mastery in my business for a long time, not only as a value, but to describe our approach to stress. So again, I said this last month, I believe as well. We don't call it or refer to it as stress management. We refer to it as stress mastery. And I actually learned that from a colleague many years ago. And the benefit of having a mastery approach is that you're working toward having those skills and abilities available to you essentially on demand. And so when I think about working with employees or individuals on getting to the other side of stress, managing stress, if you will, processing stress, becoming more resilient to stress, wouldn't it be nice if it's just always there because you've spent some time learning, growing, developing. When life throws you a surprise, you are equipped to get to the other side of it in a really healthy way. So we've been using this term for a while. And again, I like to describe it as having that skill available on demand. The funny thing about on demand is we are very much in an on-demand culture, right? We want our food delivered on demand. We want our Amazon orders delivered on demand. We want our movies and shows streamed on demand. And, my children have a very hard time understanding how it was ever not that way because everything is so immediately available to us. The interesting thing about mastery and getting really knowledgeable or good at something is it's not quick. It's not immediate. It's not overnight. It's not easy. I would argue it's worth it. So mastery really involves figuring out what's interesting to you, what's meaningful, what do you want to be able to do, and how would that benefit you, right? Intellectually, maybe spiritually, physically. And it begs the question, what do you want to be able to do on a moment's notice? So I'm going to give lots of real life examples today. As an example, one of the things I'm working on is teaching myself Italian. I would love to immediately just switch over and begin speaking Italian. That'd be pretty amazing. I have a best friend who is Italian. She taught herself English. I'm trying to teach myself Italian, and it'd be pretty badass if I could just do that. And so that's the goal. I'm working toward it. It's not happening overnight. I know it's going to be worth it. I'm enjoying the process. It puts me into what's called flow state. And I look forward to it. And so we do have lots, I think, of tools readily available to us, right? Like I can go and pay the fee, excuse me, and download Duolingo, the app, right? And I can immerse myself in the app a few minutes each day and I can work my way there. So I would say we have tools that are available on demand, which is pretty awesome. But then we need to put in the time, put in the sweat equity, lean in for a certain volume of time to get to that place where we really have command of whatever the subject matter is. I do have a tickle in my throat. I'm just going to call that out. So I'm going to get myself hydrated here and caffeinated simultaneously. I have a cup of coffee here. So we've teed up what the topic is, what it means. We've defined it. And you might be wondering, what does it take? For years, when I would speak on certain topics and mastery would come up, I would reference what's called the 10,000 hours rule. And maybe you've heard of this before. There's an author, Malcolm Gladwell, and he really introduced this in multiple of his books. And he wanted to write about what makes people incredibly proficient in their focus area. And he went on to declare that it was this magic number of roughly 10,000 hours of practice that resulted in this quote unquote tipping point of greatness. I started looking at this because I wondered or felt that 10,000 hours was this, I don't know, urban legend of like, this is the magic number. And so I like to fact check things and or just see what other people are saying about it. And I learned a lot in preparation to blog on this topic and to speak on this topic. And what I found out is that, as with most things in life, people don't agree. People are on different sides of the fence. And what I actually found out with this particular topic of 10,000 hours of practice being the tipping point of greatness is that maybe it was a misrepresentation or a misinterpretation of some research that was done by someone named Anders Ericsson. And some other people have written about this, blogged about it, and I found it really interesting. So I wanted to share a little bit. But basically, there was some concern that this was just one perspective, that it wasn't really necessarily true, that it didn't account for the for the fact that some people were achieving mastery with far fewer hours, and some people it was far beyond 10,000 hours. And then maybe there were folks that never got there. And so again, it was one interpretation or one perspective. And that's interesting. We could do a whole podcast, I think, just on perspectives and how everyone will have a different interpretation of the information in front of them. And it really helps, I think, with emotional intelligence. But anyways, I was really interested to then learn that maybe 10,000 hours isn't the magic number. So we're going to look at a couple other thoughts on that today. But in this moment, I would just consider, because I spent some time thinking about this as well, if you think back to your youth, if you think back to what you did as a child, as a teen, as a college student, what was it for you that you immersed yourself in? Like for some individuals, a lot of individuals, it was sports, right? And some people got to the point with their sport that they could be recruited, they could go on to have a college career, they could go on to have a professional career. In my sport, it was dance. I was at the dance studio 6 days a week. I was dancing from about 4 o'clock to 9 o'clock, Monday through Friday, and then a half day on Saturday, sometimes a full day of rehearsal. Even in college, I was training to dance professionally. And so I'd go to class in the morning and then I would dance the balance of the day. So it was about 5-6 hours of training a day. And so I think we have experience with mastery in our lives, right? Things that we really poured into. For other people, it might have been like an instrument or some type of art. And what's cool about that, and why I have just been so thrilled that dance was my sport and my passion and all the things, is that it has benefited me so much to this day. Like it was something that had so many volumes, so many hours, so much volume of practice. I would very comfortably say I've danced 10,000 hours. And it came with a ton of benefits. And I'm going to get into that later on when I unpack this topic a few other ways. But I'm just so glad I did it, because if I think about the benefits that came with it, I was teaching dance at a very young age. My mom says other people were going to flip burgers, and I'm going to the ballet school and teaching ballet, which was a great way to have a part-time job as a young person. If I think about it, I have then really taught dance every decade since. I've gotten to enjoy it as a performer. I've used it in the schools. I was a teaching artist for 20 years. I use it socially. I was totally cutting a rug at my husband's holiday party to the point that everyone was talking like, hey, what's her story? She must be a dancer. So it's something that, even though I said no to a lot of things so I could say yes to dance, it has served me so well. And I'm so grateful to have mastery with a lot of those dance related skills. And I'm wondering what that is for you. Like, what is it that you did or immersed yourself in? How did it benefit you? Is it something that still benefits you today? And then what we're also going to consider today is like, what's next? And that's really to support intellectual well-being, to support happiness. And we're going to unpack that today. So just something I had on my mind, like, what was it for you that potentially gave you this experience of achieving mastery? Using the dance example, and you might use your sports example or your art example or academic example, maybe not everything is available on demand, but a lot of things are. Like in my blog, I was giving the example. If you just asked me to stand up and dance and improvise, no problem. If you asked me to choreograph something, no problem. If you asked me to explain how to do something, no problem. If you asked me the history of something, no problem, right? But there are some physical capabilities that I've retained, and some physical capabilities I'd have to get back in the studio and really grind to get it done, right? So it's kind of interesting how that works. But I think physical capabilities are their own special class. Like I was having a conversation with an employee who said to me like, hey, if I get off track with exercise, how quickly do I start to lose my gains essentially? Or how quickly does fitness start to diminish when you take a break or when you get off track? And the answer to that is most most experts, most trainers will say it's about 2 weeks when you start to see your fitness or physical capabilities decline. So there are some things that are not a sure thing. We're not going to stay, conditioned or, tip-top shape with some physical capabilities, but others maybe. So it's interesting. I wanted to compare kind of this extreme 10,000 hours logic or theory against someone like Tim Ferriss. So, if you don't know who Tim Ferriss is, he is a guy that's very well known, I would say, in pop culture, probably very well known nowadays on social media. I'm a little more old school. I'm an old soul. So, I learned about him through books. But he is a guy that focuses on something called accelerated learning or rapid skill acquisition. So he's interesting. He's really interested in looking at what is the minimum you can do to get the outcome you're after and produce some benefit. So this guy went on to write a book called The 4-Hour Body. Like, how do you get the body you want in 4 hours? How do you get the workday complete in 4 hours? He has a book on the 4-hour work week. He has the 4-hour chef. And he has this other book, and I thought to pull it out. This is not light reading, but this is a book that I love to bust out over lunch and just pick one. I don't know if I guess you'd call it a chapter. They're like short interviews. So this book is called Tools of the Titans: The Tactics, Routines, and Habits of Billionaires, Icons, and World-Class Performers. Again, author of the 4-hour work week and the 4-hour body. But anyways, I love this book because Tim Ferriss is a guy that wants to learn as much as he can, as fast as he can, and he surrounds himself with all of the smartest, most capable people and interviews them and asks really powerful questions. And then in this particular book, you can just read one at a time. So that's what I do sometimes when I'm eating lunch, is just get motivated or excited or inspired or fired up about something that I've read through one of his interviews. So I highly recommend that. And the other interesting thing that Tim Ferriss has done is he's not just learned about learning and then reiterated it. He's actually done it himself. So he will take himself through these very laser focused goals and set out these very specific achievements. Like, I'm going to be a world-class performer in this art, and I'm going to do it in 6 months. And then he goes for it. So he's a really, really fascinating human. I think there are some great TED Talks you could find. Highly recommend his books. It's interesting. But again, it's taking this totally polarized stance of, how do I get there quickly? So a little bit more about him. I have a couple other fun facts. He also focuses, I talked about learning, and that's called meta learning. So that's a term that might not be on the tip of your tongue or on your mind. So meta learning is learning about learning. And yeah, I highly encourage you check out his books, see what he's up to, listen to some of his videos, see what you can glean from that. Long story short, there are multiple experts out there. There are infinite people that have written books, and everyone is going to have a different view, a different perspective, different coaching. I am a self-proclaimed self-help junkie, and I take in as much information and as many perspectives as I can, and I sort of sift through it to see what makes sense to me. How do I want to combine learning from different sources so that it works for me, so that it lifts me up, so that it motivates me, so that I feel like I've wind in my sails? That's like a common theme or a common phrase I'm using these days, is it feels good to have wind in your sails. And so you can kind of take the learning, take what works for you, leave the rest. There's a fun fact. You don't have to apply or believe everything you see out there, but you can take it as food for thought and consider what you do want to pick up and run with. So anyways, all of this I really think came to be not just because I'm working with this idea of themes, but because like anybody else on the planet, I'm scrolling on Instagram. And I don't know about your Instagram feed, but mine is showing me a lot of self-help. Shocker. It's showing me a lot of like written text versus like art like it used to, or like visually dynamic content. It's very copy heavy, and there's a lot of coaching and a lot of experts out there, and I like it, but you also have to sort through like whose messaging resonates for you and whose messaging doesn't. At least that's how I think of it. So anyways, in the process of consuming some social media, which I admittedly do, I came across the 100-hour rule, and I'm like, wait a second. I've known and spoken about the 10,000-hour rule for some time. I'm less familiar, or actually not familiar at all, with the 100-hour rule. What does that look like? And I liked the coaching. I liked the guidance that came along with it. It made sense to me. It kind of aligned with some things I've been dabbling with. But then, as with anything, like run it through Google, see what you learn, see where this came from. So that's what I did, and again, I just kind of look for inspiration all around me. And so I took that and I posted about it a little bit. And then I went on to see what else I could learn. So here's what you need to know. The coaching declares that, or this perspective, I should say, this coaching declares that by spending 100 hours in 1 year in any discipline, which is roughly 18 minutes a day, that you will be better than 95% of the world in that discipline. So I'll say that one more time. 100 hours in 1 year, which equates to roughly 18 minutes a day, and you'll be better than 95% of the world in that discipline. Makes sense. I mean, I read that and I don't challenge it. The only thing I challenge is, can I do 18 minutes a day for 365 days? I think I could. And I know other people do, because they have these Duolingo streaks on the app that are like 500 days. So people are doing it. And it ties to that idea that consistency is king, or I prefer to say queen. And what magic can happen by microdosing and putting consistency over volume. I found this to be inspiring, and I can also see how the 100-hour rule would be far more enticing, far more empowering or uplifting, especially in an industry like mine where people are really figuring out how does this fit into my life? Maybe it is something like exercise. How does exercise fit into my life? But maybe it's something, again, that inspires that intellectual wellness, like that thing you want to learn, be able to do. Heck, maybe it's even communication skills. Like not only my example of learning Italian, but maybe you're someone that wants to get really good at negotiation, or you want to get really good at what's called nonviolent communication. Like, how do I have hard conversations and get great outcomes? So we can really pick any focus area, any discipline, as they say. So I think that's really interesting. A little bit more about the 100-hour approach. It really prioritizes micro skills. So I used the word micro dosing as well. So maybe smaller, valuable components that are going to help you to get to the outcomes that you're after. It likely is so effective because people are going to feel those cumulative wins or that cumulative result. And think about how powerful that is. I mean, if you do something once a week, it's going to feel very different than if you do it every day. I mean, I know that's like complete common sense, but I think we dismiss the little things and we dismiss some of the common sense sometimes because we're chasing like these other quick fixes. And I think, or I know, especially with exercise, there's a lot of limiting beliefs about what it has to look like to produce a result. And again, I think those are self-made, self-implied. I think you could transform your body with 18 minutes a day, and that would be a fun case study. But I think it makes it accessible. I know it makes it accessible, and I know it makes it more desirable. And again, I think there's that benefit of riding the momentum. Now, there's some really interesting things happening, kind of coming back to this idea of technology. So I use the example of learning Italian. I've referenced the Duolingo app. There are other apps too. Like, for example, I'm using an app called Simply Piano to teach myself piano. I would love to have mastery in sitting down and playing the piano. So that's also on my mind and on my heart and motivates me. Um, but the thing about these apps is they're tapping into, I'm going to say it, they're kind of tapping into addiction science and, well, nudge theory, I would say too. So a couple of things are happening with these apps. I don't use, because I do health and fitness for a living, I don't use a ton of health and fitness apps. I have the knowledge. But with other practices, like learning a language, like learning an instrument, or some other new skill, I'll use an app. But here's what these apps are doing. Apps are using things like badges and notifications and, constant pings and invite a friend, and there are nudges and pushes that get sent to the phone, and all of this is because the brain likes reward, right? We have receptors in the brain. Those receptors like to be satisfied. They're satisfied by things like sugar and things like caffeine, any kind of substance, honestly. But they're also satisfied by just reward in general. That can look like attention, and that can look like likes. That can look like comments. That can look like any kind of attention, really. And so these apps are really leveraging that to stay in front of you, keep you coming back to the app, keep you checking in. And so this does really good things, I think, for consistency and for mastery, because the app is reminding you, like, hey, keep your 14-day streak alive, keep your 300-day streak alive, right? And then you're going to get rewards, and you get points, and you get badges, and it unlocks this feature, and it nudges you. It's called nudge theory. There's these constant reminders that come onto your phone. And so in some ways, it's reinforcing the learning, it's reinforcing the consistency, it's reinforcing the 100 hours, moving you toward mastery. The concern I have as a wellness practitioner is that it does keep us essentially addicted to our technology, entangled with our technology, in front of our screens, maybe defining ourselves by what we do or don't do in the app. And so, yeah, there are some considerations there. But if we're looking at what some of these apps are doing to keep people engaged and how they're using neuroscience and rewards and things like that, I think it's really interesting. And I just think we have to use it mindfully, like anything else. But if you're really looking, again, to practice something more consistently, kind of celebrate milestones, have those built-in reminders, I do think they can be pretty powerful and help you to learn whatever it is you want to learn. So I've had some really positive experiences, but some days it's a bit much, the volume of reminders and nudges that they sure send. So next, I wanted to talk about mastery as a value. Oh gosh, where do I want to start? I did explain earlier that mastery is one of the 5 values that I chose to define and drive my business, right? Every business or organization has core values. I chose mastery as one for Wellness Collective. I did that because I think, particularly in health and well-being, it's our responsibility to be lifelong learners, to make sure we're keeping up on what's been learned, discovered, best practices. I know people get tired of hearing that term, but it's our responsibility to become incredibly knowledgeable and to keep growing that and to have a certain grasp. It's really our job as wellness practitioners to have a certain grasp on the topic, knowledge on the topic, thorough knowledge, and to be able to speak on a wide variety of topics and to be knowledgeable in how to help people in a wide variety of ways that are proven to work. And yes, I do think love of learning is maybe a separate value, but I think when you're committed to mastery, it sort of implies this love or willingness rather to keep learning so that you get to that point of understanding. Um, and in my industry, that encompasses a lot of different topics. Um, so that was on my mind as I was preparing for today, and I think mastery, moving toward mastery, learning as much as you can, getting enough volume of hours of practice, getting consistent practice. It speaks to the integrity of whatever it is you're doing as well. So that's been on my mind too. Let's talk about mastery as inspiration. I think any topic, any focus area, we can use it to explore questions. I call these reflection questions, call these coaching questions. So as I was thinking about our topic today and how could we get inspired, I came up with 3 coaching questions and I'll offer them up now. My hope is that you can reflect on the questions. You can share your responses to the questions if you feel moved to do so. And my hope is that it inspires some type of action, choice, next step. I talk a lot when I speak that knowing and doing are 2 different things. So in the process of working together, in the process of listening to my podcast, if there's some tipping point, if there's some shift from not just hearing the information, but applying it and doing something with it and getting, again, some wind in your sails and getting some inspiration, some uh, not just motivation, but like you're feeling called to do something, I think that's a really big win. So here's coaching question number 1. What do you want to learn and become incredibly knowledgeable about over the next 12 months? So this is leaning into, I think, or I know, the 100-hour rule approach. What might you want to learn and become incredibly knowledgeable about over the next 12 months? It could be anything. When we figure out what's interesting to us, when we stay curious, when we start to take some action, it really does support happiness. That is evidence-based. I could talk about well-being theory, science of happiness, but I've done that a lot on past episodes, so I don't want to be too repetitive. Coaching question number 2. What skills or abilities would you like to have readily available on demand? And perhaps most importantly, number 3, how might you get started? I feel very confident that there are millions of people who have something on their mind, on their heart, in their gut that they would like to do or be able to do, and yet they're not doing it, right? So what does that look like? And I do think there's a lot of limiting beliefs holding people back. I do think there's a lot of age concern, like, oh, I could never do that. I'm too old. Or I hear a lot about, like, I've got bad knees, I've got a bad back. And it's like, listen, we're not stuck with bad parts. We can work on improving our physical capability. So, I mean, it's so cliche to say don't quit your daydream, but I think people quit their daydream all the time. I think people have things they knowingly would love to do and they're not doing them. And so at the end of the day, my encouragement is to get started. And that's kind of where we're going to go next. I think at any age, at any level, at any time, we can get started with something. And I do think that's one of my strengths. I was thinking about how to describe this to people. I think one of my strengths is getting activated. Like, I call it swinging into action, but I think activate is a powerful word. Like, when I decide that something's interesting to me, I generally just go for it and I start. Like I don't even make a plan sometimes, which coaches tell you to make a plan, business people tell you to make a plan. Sometimes I don't make a plan. I just go for it because I do think action trumps anything else on the table. Action trumps thinking about it. Action trumps writing something down and doing nothing with it. Like there's a lot of failure to implement. And so when and if something's interesting, don't give yourself time to talk yourself out of it. Just take some first step, whether it's Googling it, researching it, finding somebody who knows a lot about the topic you're interested in, signing up for something. There's like infinite ways that first step can look. And it's been my experience that that's what fuels people, fuels me, gives me energy is actually getting started and not kind of staying stuck. So anyways, again, I think we talk ourselves out of a lot of opportunities or a lot of maybe topics that are interesting to us. I think we tell ourselves it's too late, it's too expensive, I don't know where to start. Maybe a belief that like I could never do that, I'd never be any good at it. I mean, the list goes on and on. Here's a real life example. My kids have started club soccer that led to indoor soccer. I'm a new soccer mom to indoor soccer. I think it is so fun. It is so fun to watch. It's fun to be around. To me, it's a totally different like vibe. Yes, it's nice to be outside, but the rules are different. It's very fast moving. It's a little bit more social, I would say, for the parents and for the spectators. And I said to my family last week, actually, I said it to my family and I said it to my friends. I said, is there like a level 0 adult indoor league that I could join? Because I know nothing. I know I've never played indoor soccer and I know I'm 44 years old, but I think I have potential. I think I'd learn fast. I think I might look really funny at times because I kind of prance. I don't run. I like point my toes when I do everything. I totally move like a dancer. Everyone will likely look at me and say, what is going on right there? It looks a little interesting. um, but I want to do it. I think it'd be really fun. And I'm willing to put myself out there. Um, and so I bring that up because I do think we have to be brave enough to suck at something new. I do think we have to put ourselves out there and be vulnerable. I see people really struggling with this when it comes to the gym and like the weight room in particular. If someone doesn't know how to adjust the equipment, if someone doesn't know how to use the equipment, if someone else is on the equipment, I mean, there's a million reasons why they don't want to go into that weight room as maybe a new exerciser if they're unfamiliar. And so I have to kind of talk people through that and get them to the other side of it. And it's like, here are the reasons I think you should go into that weight room not knowing what you're doing. And that's reasons like people will help you. You can literally ask a friendly looking person, how do I adjust this seat? Or how do I adjust the weight? Or how do I make this work for my height? You can ask for an equipment orientation. You can find a trainer on duty and say, hey, what does this thing do? I mean, yes, you have to ask questions. Yes, you have to put yourself out there. But guess what? I feel very confident no one's going to make fun of you for coming to the weight room and trying to learn. Right. So I think if we run things through that lens of like, I've got to start somewhere. I'm willing to be a beginner. I'm willing to be uncomfortable. I acknowledge I don't know anything. And I don't know. I might be self-conscious. I might look silly. Oh, well, the alternative is to not do anything. And that comes with zero benefits. So I really do think we have to be brave enough to be a beginner and we have to get out of our own way sometimes and, not talk ourselves out of things, especially if it's something that's been on your mind for a while. So let me be a science geek for a second. It's called the trans theoretical model of change. We oftentimes go through this contemplation phase where we think about doing things. Um, and my encouragement would be this: if you're thinking about it, that's really, really positive. Um, but I anticipate you don't want to be stuck there in perpetuity. I anticipate you want to either decide you're going to do it or not do it. And so through coaching, we can help you to get there. But if it's on your mind, that's worth looking at. Okay. So I have zero problem talking for an hour. That is obvi. Um, but I do have a couple of closing thoughts that will wrap up this topic for us today. So I'm going to shift into what I'm going to call why mastery matters and what it feeds. And so this, I think, will kind of tie together and summarize some of what I've been speaking about today. And if you're wondering what my coffee cup says, it says, "A yawn is a silent scream for coffee." So on that note, I'm going to caffeinate. So I end today with 5 reasons why tackling mastery in something or anything makes good sense. First and foremost is a sense of accomplishment. It feels good to declare a goal and ultimately achieve it and finish whatever it is that we set out to do. So this is an internal satisfaction that can be experienced by reaching whatever it is you set out to do. So a sense of accomplishment goes a long way. And yeah, I am going to bust it out. I'm going to bust out the theory of well-being again, Dr. Seligman's work, the PERMA model. The A in the PERMA model is accomplishment and achievement. So the second thing I'll offer up is a recognition of achievement. So you might be wondering, what is the difference between accomplishment and achievement? Accomplishment is something that is more of an internal experience and an internal satisfaction, whereas recognition of achievement tends to be validation from an outside source or something that's kind of globally recognized as being a milestone. So if you think about an achievement, it might be something like a credential or a degree or an award, right? So that's more of an example of an achievement. So by moving toward mastery, by immersing ourselves, by learning as much as we can, number one, we have the sense of accomplishment, that internal experience and feel good accomplishment. And number two, we have the recognition of the achievement, which is potentially validated by some type of outside source, entity, population of people globally, etc. The third big benefit is a boost in confidence. The more high quality practice we get, the more we start to believe in ourselves. We believe in our ability to do something. We are potentially more willing to put ourselves out there. I think the more practice we get, the more accomplishment and achievement we get. We start to say things like, if I did it once, I can do it again. And so a boost in confidence goes a long way in terms of, I think, our professional lives, our personal lives. It feels good. And the only way we get more confident is by doing. I mean, there are other ways to boost confidence. We can become more confident shadowing somebody else. We can become more confident by asking great questions. We can become more confident by, yes, targeting very specific learning. We can get confidence through coaching. But again, I think you immerse yourself in enough practice and the confidence will come with that. That's reminding me, there was one thing I'd read in another article that I didn't mention yet. And this was related to accelerated learning, which, hey, if we can accelerate boosting our confidence, that's a win. And it said that one of the fastest ways to reach mastery is to teach whatever the subject matter is, so that you're constantly not only immersed in it, but you're having to explain it and do so succinctly and effectively to someone else. So they said you can move toward mastery significantly faster in any subject matter through the process of teaching. And that totally makes sense and resonates for me. Number 4, through mastery, moving toward mastery, you might unlock a new vocation, a new career, a new way to earn income, a new way to market yourself, a new way to get hired, essentially. I think about this a lot. Not every student is college bound, but I think every human needs a vocation. Everybody needs a skill they can put out into the world and be compensated for. So my question is, what's your vocation? Maybe you love your vocation, maybe you don't. So what can you learn to do? What skill, trade, knowledge, ability can you have that creates a new vocation for you? And coming back to my dance example, like immersing myself in 10,000 hours of dance between ages 9 and 19 equipped me with a vocation for life. I can now always be compensated and use that as a source of income, as a career if I choose to do so. So that I think is exciting. And I'm a big proponent of diversifying vocations and not just having one professional trajectory. I think it diversifies your income streams. It makes your workday more interesting. So that would be some coaching I have for today too, is if you were to add a new vocation to your life, what would that look like? And that's something I could help you with offline if you're not sure. And then finally, this ties to vocation. I think the other big benefit of moving toward mastery is similar to vocation and creating new opportunities for yourself professionally or from an income perspective. You are also going to discover new acts of service. So when you are really knowledgeable, when you're really good at something, when you have a skill available on demand, you can then gift that however you choose. Maybe it's something free you put out into the world. Maybe it's an act of service you provide for a nonprofit organization, for your community, at your kid's school, and that feels good. What we know is that ties to life satisfaction, that ties to health and happiness as well. So with that, I'm really winding down. I think if any portion of this is interesting to you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear your questions, your comments. There are ways to engage with me through the chat on this and future podcasts. You can also reach out to me directly. My email address is Katy, Katy, @wellnesscollective.com. I think my final encouragement is threefold. And again, this just as a solid recap of where we went today. My encouragement is to adopt a love of learning. What I love to learn about will be different than what you potentially love to learn about. But there is so much to gain when you have that mindset or that value of a love of learning. Massive benefit to cognition, aging in a healthy way, neuroplasticity of the brain, staying engaged in your life. There are people that I think get into retirement and they don't know what to do with themselves. They don't have a sense of purpose. They start to experience some cognitive decline, some social decline. But when we really lean into learning, whatever it is we're passionate about, when we stay active, when we stay engaged, good things happen physically, mentally, emotionally, socially, and so on. And again, it'll reveal a new vocation. It'll reveal new acts of service. My second encouragement to wrap up today is to begin or stay the course. I'll say that again, to begin or stay the course. So I think people get off track all the time with learning. People get off track all the time with health and fitness efforts or pursuits. Having this relentlessness or this willingness to begin again and or to start, and like I said, to suck at something new, to be brave enough to do something new, I think that's where the magic happens. And then my third reminder is to trust that investing in yourself and investing in your abilities a little bit each day is always a good idea. Always a good idea. Again, not only for your physical and mental well-being, but it also keeps you, as I said, active and engaged in life. But you never know what new opportunities are going to present themselves. And I do think We have whatever career we have whatever passions we have. And that doesn't just come to an end as we get older. I think that can evolve into very fun things in retirement, very fun things in side gigs, very fun things in passion projects. And if you listen to me or hang out with me at all, I am a huge fan of passion projects. And so I think in order to tap into our passions, we have to stay curious, we have to learn. And we'll discover a lot about ourselves. So, with that, that is a wrap. As of now, this podcast is occurring on the third Wednesday of the month. That's just what happens to work with my workflow, other things I have going on in my business. If there's demand, if there's interest, if there's great feedback, if you want to give me some encouragement, I am willing to show up here more often on Wednesdays. And I think I could do a shorter segment and I could address more hot topics in my industry. Alternatively, you can always join me on a Friday. I lead a free Fitness Friday workout. Now, occasionally there are conflicts in business. For example, I have a conflict this Friday, I'm realizing. But hop onto the live tab. You will always see when something is scheduled. It makes it crystal clear. It kind of smacks you in the face when you open up the live tab, shows you what's scheduled next, when it's happening, what's upcoming. In addition to that, I have a ton of content on my website, wellnesscollective.com. There's a free resource library, years and years worth of blog posts. You can subscribe to get insights in your inbox. We send those weekly from the Wellness Collective team, especially good for people that are responsible for workplace health and well-being. Obviously, we have this channel. If you don't already subscribe to Health and Happiness at Work, that would be amazing and super helpful. What else do I want to tell you? Really, any kind of social media love or engagement is awesome too. So we are on Instagram, Wellness Collective at Work. We are on the Facebook, and we are on LinkedIn. And I'd love to connect with you personally as well. So thanks so much for getting this far with me, and I look forward to the next time. Take care.